Hello and welcome to Series 9, Episode 8 of In Suspense, a podcast and vodcast for fans and writers of crime fiction. I'm Nikki Smith, and it's actually our last episode of this current series today. So I'm here with Lauren North, and we have got a bit of a full house, and it's going to be, we're having a kind of quite a fun episode. So I hope everybody enjoys it. And just like any end of term event, I think Lauren and I are a little bit giddy and excited because we've got Harrogate on Thursday, so we actually get to see each other in person, which is really exciting.
Well, we get to spend the whole weekend together and stay in a house together. We're chatting outfits where it makes it supposed to be a bit chilly. So, but I feel really bad because I always feel like every year all we talk about on the podcast this time of year is Harrogate, and then I'm like, not everybody goes. And people are like, oh, here they are again. It's July. They must be just wittering on again.
Well, we just get excited because we get to see, obviously because it's Harrogate, and that's exciting in itself, that we actually get to spend 4 days in a house together. So I'm very excited, very excited.
Me too. Yes, well, in our last episode, Leslie and I talked to Imran Mahmood about smoke and mirrors and deceiving the reader. Imran was such an insightful guest, and as a barrister himself, it was fascinating to listen to him and to hear that passion that he has for his job. So if you haven't read All I Said Was True yet, do pick up a copy, as it's an excellent read, and I'm hoping to meet him face-to-face as well in Harrogate. So he's there.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was really interesting listen, actually. He's very insightful, isn't he? He was a fabulous guest. And on today's episode, we are going to be talking to the wonderful Holly Seddon. I know we're both very excited about that. And we're going to be talking to her about what it means to write commercial fiction, what makes it successful, basically, commercial fiction, and her new novel that's coming out in September, which is called The Short Straw. She's going to be on in a little bit, but before that, I want to hear all about your news. Lauren, what have you been up to?
There's no news at the moment, can you believe it? No new book deals this week.
That's very unusual for you. Very
soon. I was ill. I had a terrible cold that really knocked me out, and then I was on holiday for a week. We went to the Lake District and stayed in a really dark and dingy cottage, and it was awful. Like, the whole holiday was lovely, but the cottage was awful, and it just made me realize how important your surroundings are to have good mental health. But we had a lovely time, and we're back, and I am just rushing through, but working very diligently, not actually rushing, through my second draft of a thriller that's got to be in, I was just looking at the calendar, in 2 weeks today.
So no panic at all then.
Yes. Very calm about it. And that's it, really. I don't think there's much else going on with me. What about you? What's going on with you, Nikki? The beach party. Tell us about the beach party.
Yes, it's official publication week for the beach party. So that's very exciting in itself. And the last couple of weeks have been a bit surreal, to be honest. Although the official publication date is this week, W.H. Smith actually took the book early and made it a deal of their week. Thank you very much, W.H. Smith. So I've had a kind of split publication day, and it's just been incredible. I've seen photos of it in all the kind of airports, in all their stores. I was lucky enough to go to France to see some friends for kind of 3 days, so went to Stansted and signed some copies myself. It's been Thriller of the Month in Apple, and it's number one in Apple books at the moment, both crime and thrillers and the charts.
Congratulations. It's like you were going to France. I think I would have had to have booked a flight somewhere just to go and see the book.
I said I was really going to do that, Lauren. If we hadn't had friends out there, I was actually just going to book a one-way ticket, go through, I think, and then just come back out again. And so I decided not to fly because I really wanted to see it. So had launch last week with Karen Hamilton in Waterstones in Covent Garden, which was lovely, which I know sadly both you and Leslie couldn't make it because obviously you were on holiday, and Leslie's in the middle of moving and all kinds of things at the moment, but so I really missed you, but after not having had a launch because my first 2 books launched in COVID, it's just been a really lovely experience. So it's been completely amazing, a bit surreal, and I'm just trying to enjoy every minute and focus on on finishing an outline for a book that's going to be hopefully out in 2025.
Exciting. It's been so great to see the beach party everywhere. I've been absolutely thrilled for you. But today's topic is what makes successful commercial fiction, which you are definitely the one to talk to, Nikki, because of your book is so commercial. And I guess we should probably talk about it a bit before we have Holly on. So I looked up the definition of commercial fiction and discovered that it is thought of as fiction written to appeal to a large or mass market audience, often with an emphasis on plot, compared to literary fiction, which has obviously the focus on the artistry, with the story being driven by character and internal motivations. So commercial fiction is generally more plot driven, and I know I'm not. Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't really ever think about that distinction between it. But I guess I do understand that it is an entertainment read, which I think is the key, I think. So what do you think?
Yes, I think that's really true, actually. Definitely kind of that entertainment value. I guess we've said, haven't we, that, our kind of books, that commercial kind of fiction, you're competing against other forms of entertainment like Netflix and things like that. So and I think there used to be, and maybe there still is in certain circles, a feeling that literary fiction is I guess kind of superior to commercial fiction, but I think that's becoming less so. And actually, when you look at the books that are actually selling in vast numbers at the top of the charts, they're certainly dominated by kind of thrillers, romance, historical books, which are all generally commercial fiction. Sometimes there's a crossover a little bit into literary, but I'd say generally they're commercial fiction. Yeah,
I completely agree. And I think the only thing that I would add to the definition is the hook, which I think at the moment is so critical, and almost the whole package of the cover, the title, the book, the way you describe it in 2 sentences. For me, that seems absolutely critical for how publishers are selling it to retailers, and then they're putting it on the shelf. So I think that's the only thing I'd add at the moment, which I think is more so than when my debut came out in 2018, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that it is a package, isn't it? And it's that being able to kind of sum up immediately to a reader what the book is about, and make it something that appeals to them, which is, it's harder than people think. It is very hard to do.
And interesting that package is actually something that is really the collaboration with the publisher. We might write the book and the pages ourselves, but that work is really coming from them, and how the work they do with focus groups and reading the market. So it's harder, I think, to do that all on your own. I have so much respect for people who do it. Like,
absolutely. And I think that totally, and I think that I completely agree. It is a kind of it's a kind of whole kind of team effort. The book has to be good, otherwise people aren't going to enjoy it when they do read it, but it needs to kind of look good and be attractive instantly for readers to be able to pick it up in the first place.
Yes, and talking of really attractive books, have you seen Helene Kist's new book? Is it Killer Bodies?
Killer Bodies, yes.
With the gorgeous yellow cover.
Yeah.
And she is self-publishing, and her covers are so amazing. And that is a book, a locked room murder set in a gym, which
I've got a proof to read of it, actually.
Yes, I've got a copy pre-ordered, so I'm looking forward to it. So up my street, isn't it? But actually, talking of it's too hard to do all on your own, she actually has done amazingly. So definitely look out for that one.
Yes, definitely. Well, and also I think our guest today is hopefully going to shed some light on this topic. Yes. So I think it's probably time to welcome to In Suspense, Holly Seddon.
Welcome, Holly, to In Suspense. Thank you so much for joining us. Before we go ahead and ask all our questions, would you mind introducing yourself to our listeners, please?
Yes, I'm Holly Seddon. I'm a thriller author. That's right, what I said, I guess. I'm a thriller author. And I am possibly known to your listeners as the co-host of the Honest Authors podcast. And I'm currently working on my 7th book, and my 6th book, The Short Straw, is out in September.
And I absolutely loved The Short Straw. Absolutely hooked me. The blurb sounds so exciting. It just draws you straight into a really racing, exciting story. Can you please tell our listeners what it's about?
Yes, so The Short Straw is about three sisters who are unhappily travelling home together after a family birthday, and they are driving up north through the countryside that they used to live in when they were really little, and their car runs out of petrol and they get stranded, and they know the area vaguely because they lived there when they were little, and they make their way to an old house which they used to know because their mother worked there when they were young, and when they get there it is abandoned and they have to take shelter there for the night.
So scary.
And all kinds of horrible things happen. we won't do any spoilers. It's a really pacey read, and I thought that was particularly impressive because you've managed to include several characters. So you've got the three sisters, Nina, Lizzie, and Asa. Is it Asa? Is that
it's Asa? Yeah.
Asa, yeah, you pronounce it. But then you've also got a kind of story going on with some other characters like Rosemary, William, Selena, Jane, Alan, and Bob. And you've also got kind of timelines running like alongside each other. So I probably know the answer to this already, but was it tricky to pull off?
It actually wasn't. It was
really
one of the easiest writing experiences. I think because I knew it would be tricky because of all the making sure that the timing synced. So I planned it quite extensively, and actually this is probably the closest finished result to a plan that I've ever had. The timing was tricky. I had to, like, at some point I literally had to time myself walking around to get a sense of how long things actually took, because I think you can truncate stuff in your mind, or you can expand stuff and find that actually that's a really unrealistic amount of activities to write in 10 minutes. But the thing that came later actually was the past timeline. So it was alluded to in the present, and actually it really needed to come alive in its own right. And that the Rosemary point of view, and I think it's okay to say that Rosemary is the adult sibling's mum.
Yes.
So her point of view came later, and actually because I knew the girls so well by then, and because I knew their childhood from their point of view, I actually felt that she was quite fully formed and their family was quite fully formed, and then it was a case of coming at it from sort of a more parental point of view and filling in some of those missing pieces that they might not have been aware of when they were children. So it was almost like I'd given myself the enough clues to work with. So yes, it was not easy, but not as hard.
No book is ever easy.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to mislead.
Yeah, I really loved the dynamic of the sisters. You handled that so well, and because I'm one of my favorite books is yours, the women's fiction one you've written, which the name's gone out of my head.
Love will tear us apart. Yeah.
Yes, and I just feel like you get so far into a character's heart and it really comes across on the page, even in your thrillers. So what was great about the three sisters is their reactions when they got stranded, because we all cope so differently, don't we, with an emergency situation. And so we have to ask, which sister would you be, and why?
I think there is a little bit of me in all of them. I'm the eldest in my sibling group, which is only the two of us. So I'm a bit bossy. And I think I would feel like I had to take charge and look after everybody. However, I wouldn't have done it very competently because I'm a little bit more like Lizzie, who's the middle sister, who's scared of spiders, scared of the dark, scared of her own shadow, an introvert who likes to spend time alone on a train. That is me. Asa, who's the youngest, I would say is probably who I would like to be more like, and I'm not. She's very plucky, gobby, but she's actually very, she feels things very deeply. She just doesn't always show it, and she's got a lot to prove because she's the youngest. but I do share her secret love of musicals.
Oh, lovely. Oh yeah, I can see. Yeah, there's a little bit of all of us. I think that's what's great about all three sisters, is there's something you can identify with in all of
I hope
them.
so.
And the book is set in the Lake District in an old abandoned manor called Morthwaite Manor, if I pronounce that right.
I don't know why I chose such a tricky name, but yeah, that's right.
And without giving anything away in the plot, it's a very creepy place, which I completely understand, because I've just come back from the Lake District, staying in quite a creepy cottage.
Oh, really?
So,
Okay.
yes, I was on my mind as I was.
You should have seen some of Lauren's photos. It was one of them. We were like,
scary taxidermy on the walls of the cottage, like very vicious foxes. Did you model it on somewhere that really exists other than my holiday cottage, or is it a purely fictional place? And why the Lake District?
So this sounds a bit strange, but I have had this house in my head for decades, but I don't know why, or where it is, where it's from, whether I dreamt it, whether I went somewhere as a child. Like, it could have been like we didn't go to like Toys R Us and stuff when we were kids. We got taken to like old houses and stuff. It's probably from that. And I've always loved abandoned houses. I think there's something so, I don't know, I'm a bit of a goth, I suppose, but it's like the beauty of the decay, and it's kind of like, I don't know, you feel like you're in sort of something almost organic. It becomes live. It's like filled with nature, makes its way inside and things like that. So I did a lot of research into abandoned houses, but I actually needed my house to not be completely tumbling down, and you have to read the book to find out why and how. But so I knew that I wanted to do something in an abandoned house. This house has existed in my mind anyway, but the Lake District, I travelled through the Lake District on the way to Scotland when my oldest two, who are now in their 20s, were tiny, and it was just a point on the map that we were going through, so I had no expectations. And when we drove, it was absolutely the most epic, beautiful. Like, I cried at how beautiful it was. So I always sort of, I don't know, it was just always there in my head as an epic, fantastic place. And I didn't want to set anything there until I could actually go and see it for myself again, because obviously that's 20 years out of date. And I lived in Amsterdam 6 years, so I started writing this when I knew we were moving back, and I knew that once we were back, I would actually be able to go up and see it. And so some of it was written from memory, some of it from Google Images and Google Maps, whatever, but it was then kind of massively corrected when I actually went to see it. And it's just so vast. We've not got a big country, you know. England or the UK is not particularly big, and yet there is this sparse, like, everything is just huge. Like, the water is noisy, there's lots of it, the hills are huge, there's lots of them, and
they are hilly.
How do you manage that? And I mean, I just, any excuse to go back there. I've just done a little trip going into bookshops and things like that, and I was almost immediately, I was emailing my editor like, do you need me to go again? Maybe there's some more bookshops, because I just loved it. So yeah.
Yes, you need a writing retreat up there, Holly.
Yeah,
that's what you need. For the next one, just go and escape into the hills. Yes. Now, some of the themes in the book are very dark, and was there anything in particular that inspired you to write about them that you can tell us about without giving any spoilers?
They are dark. These are dark times, and I am a worried, dark person. I'm like, but I am actually a very worried, dark person. And I think my dark stuff and my concerns, my anxieties, and I don't think I'm unusual in this, I think it's quite common, they come out through the writing. And I often don't know what it is that's just in the corner of my eye until I start writing, and I realize I'm going in that direction, and I'm exploring stuff that feels like has been there all along and just been waiting for me to kind of grasp the nettle, I suppose. I often don't know what my themes are. I'll have my plot, I'll have my setting, then I'll have my characters, but the themes kind of emerge as I'm writing, and it's almost always a surprise, but it's almost always obvious as well. And obviously I can't afford a therapist, so it all comes out in writing. But I really wanted to write about inherited trauma, and I think that probably sounds really big, and I don't mean it as big. I think trauma can be that can include quite small moments, decisions, concerns that are passed from parent to child, anxieties. It doesn't have to be like a huge catastrophe that ripples down. Obviously, we do have some pretty big stuff in this one, and that has definitely been on my mind as something to explore. And I also, and I knew this going in, I have a bugbear about obligation, especially in girls and women, and how this can be inherited. Despite mums wanting something very different for their daughters will often be passed the baton of obligation anyway, or they will copy. And it's something I don't have an answer for, but it's something that I wanted to explore because I think it will resonate with a lot of parents. It doesn't just have to be mums, but it does feel like it's a particular issue. The obligation to not speak up or to go along with, or not to make a fuss, or to be a nice girl, and all of that stuff is so dangerous. So that was there, but yeah, no spoilers.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, I agree.
And I know exactly what you mean about putting your anxieties into a book. In Safe at Home, I had a very anxious mother, and she couldn't really focus on anything. She was so upset, and I wrote that in the first lockdown, and all of that anxiety just went straight into that book. So a very anxious mother book.
And when you look back, because it's the editorial process is so long, isn't it? And you can be quite a different person at the start of it when you're brainstorming, and then when you come to copy edit, that could be a year later.
Yes.
And macro stuff will have changed, like we came out of lockdown by the time I finished this, but also micro stuff changes. Like during the writing of this, my oldest two children left home. They were due to. It wasn't like they didn't run away, but it was. So I went from being a day-to-day mum of 4 to a day-to-day mum of 2. I'm obviously still a parent of 4, but it's different.
Yes.
All of that stuff is there, and all of those, when children leave home, you're right back when they were little. You're reviewing everything, and it's like a really complex place to be. And I think that it's there in between the pages, especially in those chapters.
And you've got that coming up, Nikki, haven't you?
I know. I think you're right. I think it's those things that go into books. Even writing about the beach party, it's about a load of teenagers, or they've just finished uni that kind of go away. And again, it's that it's thinking about my daughter just about to hit that time of her life. I think that comes through. It's weird how your subconscious works and what you end up dealing with in your writing. Yeah.
I don't know how anyone who isn't an author deals with this.
Therapy.
Yes. Now, our topic for today's show is what makes successful commercial fiction. So, Holly, what do you think are the factors that can help make a novel particularly successful in this genre?
So I thought about this ahead of time because it's a really
big question.
It's a big question.
No pressure.
But I actually think it's quite simple, sadly. So I think a compelling and simple hook, first and foremost. You have to be able to say, when people say, what is it about? You have to be able to say it. And not, well, if you imagine this and then, but take it there and then you've lost them. It has to be a one-liner. I think a debate or dilemma that anyone can insert themselves into and think, what would I do? And often that is the hook as well, but it doesn't have to be. I think a well-drawn setting and identifiable characters. I think you don't have to like them. I don't hold any trust that likable characters stuff, but I think you have to be able to say, for example, Nina is the eldest and she's like this. Lizzie is the middle child, she's like this. And not be like, which one was it? Because they all seem kind of the same, and that's really important.
Yeah.
I think there are also in fact, more than anything, business concerns. So I think there needs to be a space for it on the shelves. I think you need to be able to say, and we're talking about commercial fiction, you need to be able to say it would go there on the shelves. It's a bit like X, but with a pinch of Y. That doesn't mean same but different, and it doesn't mean regurgitating or anything like that, but people have to know what they're reaching for and where to find it. And then publisher, budget and ambition, which gets decided partly because of all the factors that I've just gone through, and also because of other stuff which authors may not want to think about, like author brands and lots of other less arty stuff too.
And there's such a bit of luck as well, because like you're saying about the space on the shelf, which I completely agree with, when you sit down to write a book, as you say, it's such a long process. You can't possibly know what that shelf space is going to look like in that time. It's the publisher, and the publisher also doesn't really know, because it's still that once a deal, it's still so far in advance, and so there is such a huge element of luck involved in all of those elements as well. Like you can look at what might be coming up, and you can get a sense, and you can add in all the factors you've mentioned, which I agree with, but there's still that.
Absolutely. And what publishers think is going to be popular with the public, and even what, when you start writing kind of thing. So you get your idea signed off and off you go, whatever. But that can completely and utterly change in a year's time. And so, I think you're right, Lauren, it is luck to a certain extent.
And just hope that you're the one that's got the idea that someone hasn't. Like even in the cinema the other day, I walked past 2 adverts. One was DreamWorks and one was the people who did Toy Story, whose names I forgot. Pixar. And both of them have got films out this summer involving like water people. Like they're both really blue adverts. And I was like, that happens to us all the time as well, doesn't it? Like they wouldn't have known they were both doing a water film, but they both did. Like
I
weird.
junked a book earlier this year, or was it even last year? I don't know what month I'm in. It was last year, because of that exact thing. Like you take a risk once you start committing to an idea, because you don't know what other people are writing, and also there is stuff bubbling away in the ether that you pick up on, and other people do. You can't help it. And the book that I was writing had an element to it that is sort of it's been around for a long time in folklore and things like that, so it wasn't like I invented it, but I hadn't seen it done in thrillers for a while. And then suddenly I was hearing about more and more, to the point where I thought, well, I can carry on and be one of many, or I can stop and think. And that's what I did.
And I think my experience you've had, like, because you've had so much experience as an author, that you knew to stop. And I think that that's something that a lot of authors wouldn't necessarily know to do.
It was a hard decision, and it took a while to fully make it. But as soon as I started thinking it, that decision was almost foregone conclusion. It's tricky. And
but that's why I think it is good. Sometimes you do need to be able to make that decision, I think, because otherwise there's just no point, kind of thing. As you say, it's you're kind of writing and you're already lost a bit of enthusiasm for the idea, because you don't feel it's exciting anymore. And I think that comes through in your writing, so then it ends up being a worse book. So you do need to know when to stop, I think, sometimes.
It's your name on the cover, and it's your, and obviously people listening are going to have a varied experience and knowledge, but track record in sales is a thing. And if you limp out with something that you don't believe in, your publisher's going to find it hard to believe in that if you don't believe in it, and so on. And it just, momentum is so important. And you're giving yourself an incredible uphill battle if you put something out that you don't believe in, and you're giving everybody else a really hard job to do. And then you're very unlikely to sell as well, and then it makes it harder for your next book. So it is important to make those decisions, even though they're hard.
Absolutely. And how much influence do you think publishers have over making a book a commercial success? And do you think authors have any control or influence over these things?
So I was thinking, do I give a diplomatic answer, or do I give an honest one?
Go honest.
But I have to give an honest. I am one half of the honest authors, right? I would say once it's written, so from that point onwards, because the writing is the author's job, once it's written, I think 90-10, 10 being the author's influence.
I'd agree. I would agree.
And also,
like
what a
that,
relief.
because I like to think that I could,
Yeah.
with, you know, that it could just be down to my will and enthusiasm, but it's not true. It is so much more about, you know, there's only so much you can influence. And I think that you can support the publishers 90%. You can do the stuff they ask. You can give ideas. You can be enthusiastic. I think it's really important. But ultimately, it's also important possibly for our mental health to recognize what we cannot influence and focus on what we can, because otherwise you are in for some sleepless nights, spinning your wheel, trying to do other people's jobs and all of that stuff.
And that only causes treads on toes if you try and do that.
And and I think, as you said, Lauren, it's almost a relief to hear people say that, because it is like, I've done my job, I've written the best book I can, you know, I've done the edits, I've done all of that, and now I'm handing over to somebody else, and there is very little that you can do at that point. You just have to let it go. It's a product, it's, you know, and it feels personal, because obviously, you know, I think that's just part of writing. It feels incredibly personal, but at the end of the day, there's nothing you can do, or very little, as you say, that you can do. I think you just have to leave it and go, okay, on to the next one, and that stops you kind of spiraling into a mental health kind of situation.
I think you should be an enthusiastic partner to your publisher in all things, but I think you should also recognize where you can put your energy to make a difference and where you can't, and not waste energy.
And I don't know if you guys find this, and it's certainly something I think that's grown on me over time, is that once that book has gone to them and we're now into structural edits, I don't see it as my book anymore. I almost feel like I have sold it to them and it's yours, and I'll help you make it the best it can be, but it doesn't belong to me anymore. And I think that when it then comes to the reviews and everything that happens, like, I feel like I'm slightly removed from it. And I think that for my mental health, that really helps. So when the sales are crap, it's like, well, that's that book and that's the publisher, and it's not me, because I sold that to you. It's gone.
True. That is absolutely true. And I remember somebody saying to me when I was very new, it's the publisher's job, but it's the author's fault, because that's how it feels. You know, when you have a book that tanks, your track is affected and that affects your future, but it is not your fault. That's how it's a perception, but it's how it feels. But actually it's not. There's nothing, once you've handed it over, so long as you have been enthusiastic, not been obstructive and all of that stuff, which I obviously never would be, then it is down to the publisher to do all their stuff that they're an expert in. You can't be an expert in absolutely everything.
Exactly. And there's only one of you, and it needs a much bigger team to make things successful.
So Matt Haig has several times used Twitter to rail against what he sees as the completely false distinction between literary fiction and commercial fiction. And for him, the only worthwhile distinction is between books that are good and books that are bad. And I certainly agree with some of the sentiments of that, because it is about how much you enjoy the book. But would you agree with that?
I would agree with elements of it. I think when it comes to what readers choose to read and rave about, it should absolutely be about joy and love and what they enjoy and what has moved them and all the rest of it. And it doesn't matter. That could be non-fiction, that could be anything, it could be manga, it doesn't matter. But I do think there's some confusion around definition. And maybe this is because I'm just a bit anal, and maybe it's because I was an editor. But it is a little bit of a bugbear that people sort of misuse different terms. And I think literary fiction is something that gets misused. I think people use it when what they mean is well written.
Yes, I agree.
Good or elevated. And actually, I think that's an insult to commercial fiction, because good commercial fiction can be elevated, good, well written. It can move you. It can change your life.
100%.
But literary fiction does have a meaning. Literary fiction experiments with form, experiments with linguistics. It doesn't easily slot into a commercial genre, and it absolutely has its place. And I think you can have a book that borrows from that or has a foot in both camps. But I do think we should be careful confusing academic terms for value judgments. And good and bad are subjective, obviously. But I do agree that from a reading perspective, it just doesn't matter, and you should read. And I hate snobbery about reading, and I hate again, obligation about reading. Like there are books that, like when you see the 100 books you have to read, it makes me want to not read any of them.
Yeah,
I probably have
I'm
read half of
going
them,
through
you
that
know. That's not, for me, that's not what reading.
Yeah, 100%. And you mentioned earlier about how important the hook is at the moment for commercial fiction, and I mentioned that as well in the introduction. And I just wondered, at what stage do you develop your hook? Is it like the first thing you do, or does it come after the first draft? And sort of how do you go about making sure you've got a hook?
It's now the first thing. I mean, I hadn't taken creative writing class or anything since school, and I felt my way into this. And like I said, I was an editor and a journalist, so I'm not new to writing, but I was new to the business of writing. I didn't know about genre, I didn't know about hooks, I didn't know anything. So I accidentally found what I still think is a really great hook from my first book, and it was like a gift, an absolute gift. I heard it, I was listening to something on the radio and I had this idea, and it was a perfectly encapsulated one-liner, but my second wasn't, you know, because I didn't know, and that sort of had to make its way to a hook. Now I absolutely think it's the absolute first thing. It's that one line. I think commercial fiction needs a one-line hook. Everything hangs off, because I think as authors we are up against some of the best TV for decades, and lots of it. We are up against social media, we're up against everything else that people do on their phones. We have to sell books really snappily, but hook alone isn't it. Like we have to deliver on the promise. And I think because especially if it's a really great hook and then we don't deliver, people are even more affronted and the reviews will be more scathing. So I think if it's just a hook or even just plot, I think readers often feel let down. And I think we still need that great setting, those compelling, distinctive characters, all that stuff that we talked about earlier. But if we don't have the hook, I think it's, again, another uphill battle that you're giving yourself and the publishers. But I do also think, like, maybe again, there's a bit of snobbery about things that are all plot and all hook, because just because they're not for me, for some people that is what they're looking for. And I think we've always had those, like the Victorian penny dreadfuls. I don't know if you know about those. I think every generation has its penny dreadfuls. But for me, and in terms of like a really fantastic commercial book, I think it needs to be a full thing hanging off a hook.
Yes. I totally agree. But I think, as we were saying in the introduction, I think hook has become so much more important, particularly over even in the last few years. You know, as you were saying, Lauren, right, compared to when your debut came out to now, I think that now it is something that publishers are looking for, because, as you say, Holly, you're competing against so many other entertainment mediums that you've got to be able to stand out, and that does take a good hook. It's just unfortunate that it's often really difficult to do that when you're trying to sum it up in a story. You're
talking to somebody who is definitely casting around for her next hook, who has, for once, a setting and a like kind of loosey-goosey idea of how, and no hook. So I'm looking for that hook to slot in. So the other stuff is sort of snuck up on me, and I'm like, I don't need you yet.
Yes, wait, we need the hook first. Yes. Only it came nicely in order, that would be yes. But now you've written several books, Holly, now, which would all be classed as thrillers, I think, in the genre of commercial fiction. But I would also say that you bring in elements that are found in other genres within commercial fiction in some of your novels. So you've got elements of a love story. I think it would probably be classed as kind of, I guess, women's fiction in Love Will Tear Us Apart, and also to an extent, actually, in the kind of in the short straw bit, there's definitely that theme of love anyway going through it. And is this something that you set out to do deliberately when you write, or just does it evolve naturally when you're telling the story?
So with the example of Love Will Tear Us Apart, which I am so fond of, I just had the most lovely writing experience and just loved it, but did not know what I was doing, and really like tied my hand behind my back for that, because I should have followed up Try Not to Breathe with, and this was the second one I wrote, and it then got delayed until the third. which I have talked about on the other podcast before, so I'm not going to go on and on about it. But it was actually not a smart move. I should have written a pure crime thriller. I didn't know that because I didn't know
but you
anything.
don't know, though, do you?
And
Yeah.
actually, it started as a thriller. It was a thriller idea, and the idea was, so what it's become is about childhood friends who made a promise that if they were still single when they were 30, they would get married. And then it's, what does that actually look like in reality, in a real world relationship? What it was going to be was that premise, but the boy of the pair, did everything he could to make sure that the woman was sort of in a desperate position and would. That's a thriller, right?
Yeah.
But then I started writing about these characters as children, and they were people to me, and he wouldn't have done that because most people don't do that, and he was whole and he had a family, and do you know what I mean? And I just couldn't do that to the characters. That's why it ended up changing and becoming what it was. I'm so proud of it, and it's probably the one that if people like it, they love it. It was a harder sell because it wasn't a thriller. It's maybe a suspense, but it's what's called women's fiction. I hate that term, but it's what it's called. So that wasn't deliberate, and if I did that again now, I would do it under a pen name, and that's so I wouldn't not write it, but I would have I would now be more aware of like business concerns and shelf space and all of that stuff. But I've not really answered your question. Do I deliberately set out to? I have some tests for myself that I have to kind of pass for the book to be plausible, and it's like, would a real person do this? Situation actually happen? Doesn't have to be, would I do this? Because generally I wouldn't. But it's, would they do this? And for them to do this, for most normal people, and I don't write about psychotic people, I don't write about sort of monsters, I write about real people. Most of what people will do in extremis is for love. It's love of children, it's love of friends, it's love of partner, parents, whatever it may be, but it's love. That's, I think, the most powerful driver, because even desperation is often desperation for saving the people that you love. It all comes back to love. So to not include love doesn't, and I'm not a soppy person, I probably sound like that, I'm really not, but I love the people I love so fiercely, and I include friends in that, and obviously my children, obviously my husband. That's the only way I would do anything kind of bad or extreme, would be for them. So I have to give my characters things and people that they love enough to do these crazy things.
That's a great answer. I think that's very true. Actually, it's important to see kind of extremes of even if it's a thriller. So yes. And as we're talking all about commercial fiction today, we thought we'd play a little game because it's our final episode of this series.
I'm laughing because I'm going to fail so bad.
Oh no, you won't as bad as me. I'm terrible at games. Pressure.
So it's called Guess the Book, and I'm going to read out 10 hooks or first lines of some very successful commercial thrillers, and I thought you could both try and guess what book they belong to.
I'm just going to be so bad at this, and I'm here going, the hook is so important, guys, and I'm not going to recognise any of them.
Okay, so the first one. Who are you, and what have we done to each other?
God, it just could be anything. I don't actually know. I don't want to say now that I don't know how good a hook that is. It's just a tagline, though, isn't it? More than I've literally got no idea.
Are these like, now here I start getting into like the nitty gritty, trying to, rather than just giving an answer, but is this like stuff that's out now currently, or
not necessarily? No, but they are very famous ones.
Is it The Silent Patient?
No.
That's my guess. Okay, that was my guess. I'm done.
It's Gone Girl.
Oh
I could have got a better hook than that for Gone Girl.
Did I say Gone Girl? Did I say it out loud?
I think
I actually say it out loud, but
Gone Girl. I think
points.
Gone Girl. Yes.
Don't give me any points, but say it out loud.
Half points for thinking it.
Okay, right. We'll try another one. Okay, so this
God.
this is the first line one. So the snow in the mountains was melting, and Bunny had been dead for several weeks before we kind of came to understand the gravity of our situation.
I really like that, but I feel like I'd know it if I read that book. But
This is one of my favourite books ever.
Is it the one that I'm supposed to read and haven't by Donna Tartt?
Yes.
Which I can't even remember the name. What an imbecile.
History.
That's
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
Yeah,
I know I
not
should
a
have read
thing.
it. I've
And
got
it's
two
funny
copies of
because
it.
my daughter actually had got some Waterstones vouchers and she went and bought it yesterday, and that's a real kind of whole generation thing. I think God, I remember reading that and loving it, and it's now come round again. So yes, sign of a very good book.
We've got
I guess.
2 copies, and I actually gave one to my daughter, but I've not read it yet for absolutely no reason. Just it's one of those. I've got Gorky Park. It's the same.
Yes,
I really want to read it. And I've never got the time. I've always got something to read for work or something.
Yes, the TBR pile that's leaning over. Yes. Okay. Right. Number 3. A forgotten girl, a terrible secret, 2 lives at stake.
So I feel like
I try not to breathe.
Yes.
Oh, well done.
I'm so glad you got that one, Holly. So glad you got that one. Okay, number 4, a remote island, an invitation to die for.
Oh.
It's either and then there were none, or it's a new version of it.
Is it? It's not The Island by Callie Taylor, is it?
No, but you're kind of along the right. It's kind of along the right lines. It's The Guest List by Lucy Foley.
Oh yes, yeah. I knew I would have known that one. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, we've got he's a famous writer. She's his number 1 fan.
Misery.
Yes. See, that's it. When I was reading back, I was like, that's a really good hook, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like that was such a good idea. Yeah, that one. Okay, the next one. Only she knows what happened, only I can make her speak.
That's The Silent Patient, is it? Yeah.
The Silent Patient. Yes. I just froze then. I was like, no, I knew that one.
Yes. Okay. Everyone's telling a different story. Who do you believe?
Oh, it's so tricky because I feel like I should know this one. Is it?
few that could.
Is it The Ugly Truth?
It is.
That's a classic. It's a classic hook.
Yeah. It could have been anything actually.
It's very good. It's very good. Okay, we've got behavioral. I'll try again. Behavioral science, the FBI section that deals with serial murder, is on the bottom floor of the Academy building at Quantico, half buried in the earth.
Is it Silence of the Lambs?
Thomas Harris,
Good,
yes.
very good.
Yes. And then finally, we've got You Don't Know Her, but She Knows You.
Oh, God.
Oh, I feel like I should know this one. A slightly stalkery one. So I want to say, is it one of Leslie's? Because you've done one of mine and Holly's. Was it one of yours, Nikki?
No, it's not one of mine.
Is it one of Leslie's? It's not the rumor.
Rumor?
No.
No, it's not.
Yeah, I feel like I know it.
You will know it. Girl on the Train.
Oh my God.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh, very good. Yeah. Well, if you did well at home, everybody, do let us know. Better than us.
It's a lot harder than people think, actually, I think. Yes.
I often daydream when I'm on my runs on like what I'll do when I'm really, really famous, like what I'll get invited to. And I'm like, right, I won't do any general knowledge quizzes because I'll be terrible at them. The only one I think I could do is catchphrase. And even then, I just think the pressure on me would be like massive.
Can't deal with that. Yes.
Say what you see.
Yes.
Well, that was great fun. Thank you very much, Nikki, for organising that.
Oh, thank you.
So, and finally, before we go and close our final series for final episode of Series 9, we'd love to know what you're reading at the moment, Holly, what you could recommend to us, please.
So I've come up with a few that I've read recently and loved. So one of them is Uncle Paul by Celia Fremlin. And this, I've seen it everywhere and I'm so delighted.
Yeah.
It's a reissue, psychological crime from like 1959. And it's so, it's when I say modern, like you do know that it's set when it's set because of detail, but it's so fresh and witty and absolutely believable and creepy. And I just loved it. And I've also, in preparation for an Orion Incident Room panel that I'm doing at Harrogate, I'm reading Anna Mazzola's The House of Whispers, which is set in Italy in 1938, and it's very prescient on the rise of fascism. And lastly, my girl Gillian McAllister's new book is out next month, and it's called Just Another Missing Person, and it has honestly one of the best twists I've ever seen.
Exciting.
Yeah, I read Anna Mazzola's House of Whispers and loved it. That was really, really good. Yes.
Yeah.
What about you, Nikki?
I've read this week this one here, which is called The Babysitter by Emma Curtis, which I really enjoyed. Yes, it's kind of dark and twisty and got a good body count in there. And
I
really,
read that the other week.
I really enjoyed it. So
really
yes.
Good.
Yes. How about you, Lauren? What have you read?
Again, what is this thing we do called reading? I don't really know. I don't really have time. I read on holiday. On holiday, I was like, I took 3 books, which is ridiculous. But I wanted to read books that I didn't have any obligation to read, if you like, from the books. I think on holiday, I really just like to enjoy books. And so I read Carrie, Soto is Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid, and perfect timing because Wimbledon was on. And I'm not a huge tennis fan at all. I haven't actually watched any Wimbledon, not even the final that was on last night.
It was so good. It was so good.
I know, it was sort of on in the background. I was like, oh, okay. But I really enjoyed it. I just love her writing and her stories. So it was a wonderful book to read on holiday. And that's all I've got to recommend.
Yes, I think you can tell when people are editing up to a deadline.
I know.
No time to read. No, I've read nothing.
My book.
Yeah, exactly. So very sadly, we have to draw this to a close. We could carry on talking to you for ages, Holly, but I'd like to thank you very much for coming on the show today, and to remind our listeners and viewers that Holly's latest book, The Short Straw, is out in hardback and ebook on the 14th of September. Is that right, Holly? Yes. So it can be pre-ordered, everybody. So go out and grab yourself a copy.
It's audio as well, out on the same
and audio. Yes.
It actually will be a brilliant audiobook, actually. Yes, and it has been so lovely to talk to you, Holly, and to pick your brains about commercial fiction. So thank you very much. Next week, there won't be an episode of In Suspense, because as we've said, this is our final episode of the series, which is very sad for us. But we're taking a bit of a break for the summer holidays, and we'll be back at the beginning of September for series 10 with some fascinating guests, and also our new series of mini-sodes with an agent's assistant. So that's going to be really exciting. We're going to be focused on both subbing to an agent and the author-agent relationship. So if you have any burning questions, do get in touch. I know I've already started making a list this morning of ones I want to ask. So yes, get in touch with us, and we'd love to ask.
Yes, do let us know anything that you'd like to ask. And if you've enjoyed today's episode, then please rate and review on whatever platform you're listening on, so that others can find us. We thought people might find it interesting to know that since In Suspense has started, our listeners are kind of growing. It's been downloaded over 16,500 times. So hopefully we're doing something right. But for now, we shall say goodbye for the end of this series. So it's goodbye from Holly Seddon.
Bye.
Goodbye from Lauren North.
Goodbye.
And goodbye from me. Goodbye.